Buddy, it's Regan here with Never Stop Healing. And today we're going to be talking about some very interesting things. But first of all, I want to ask how everybody's doing. So as you guys come in and get cozy, we've got some interesting topics. We'll be sharing with you some of the breakthroughs on peptides like Semeglutide or Semiglutide. Same peptide, different pronunciation. We'll be talking about the glucagon-like peptide receptors, which is where this peptide falls into, and then we'll also be covering some of the interesting things that we're seeing in the recharge, and I'll be talking about some interesting Chinese medical concepts of Shen, Qi, and Jing, and we'll be just kind of kicking off things based on some questions that many of you have had on anti-aging and longevity and telomere attrition and things like that. So as we jump in today, I just ask questions as we go throughout this. Happy to share those with you. Really want to express my appreciation for everyone who was on yesterday in our hack. If you're not on our hack and you're in our community, make sure you get on those Wednesday calls. They're super interactive. We just finished the recharge, the 60-day reset, and we just started our recharge. So there's a lot that we're covering there, and the recharge is all about the epigenetics, the kidney reset, the DNA. And then, that's the beginning phases of the recharge. And then we jump into repairing leaky gut, removing biotoxins, creating this mitochondrial reboot. So today I'll be covering some of these things. But as I jump in, first of all, if you look at some of the things that I find the most meaningful in life, and some of the core philosophies that have inspired me, there's this concept in Chinese medicine called the three treasures. And one of the issues that we had in the Chinese culture is there's this kind of departure in the medicine in the 1950s when Mao Zedong came in and brought in communism to China, and the last emperor was basically dethroned. Mao Zedong said, we need to standardize Chinese medicine. And so he drew a circle, and he said, okay, anything outside of this circle, we're not going to deem that as being meaningful or useful. And so anything inside of the circle, we're going to use that and standardize this and deploy it in all of our hospitals. Because at first he wanted to get rid of all Chinese medicine, all traditional medicines, and they were departing from the old China and bringing in the new and bringing in Western medicine. But then he realized that people didn't like Western medicine. It was too aggressive, too many side effects, and way too expensive. And so he said, okay, we'll bring in the traditional medicines, but we're going to remove anything that relates to the spirit. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Some of the things that were removed from the traditional texts and from the traditional kind of philosophy and underlying foundations of Chinese medicine that existed. You can read about it 2,500 years ago in a text called the Yellow Emperor's Classic. And that was a compendium of all of the thinking that had gone on throughout thousands of years. Basically it was passed on through family lineages, where they had 50, 60 lineages of doctors in these families, and they would compile all of their most powerful treatments and therapies. And then they would eventually they would meet and they would discuss different treatment strategies, and then they would all agree on different philosophies and the medicine. And that's how the medicine evolved over time. And then later on the five elements came into place, but essentially it all starts with this the spiritual aspect, which once again, it gets missed a lot. And so I'm going to share with you a diagram here. So for those of you who are watching this, you can see it. But this is DNA and spirit. You can see that there. And so there's 5 aspects. If you think about your spirit, in Western thinking, you have your spirit and your body. And one of the brilliant things that Galileo did is he said, well, let's create this separation between the spirit and the body. And that's where a lot of experimentation happened. That's where people started understanding, having a greater understanding of physiology, because we started looking at the body as a machine that could be broken. And as long as you just fix the parts, everything's going to be okay. As we learned, just trying to fix the parts and not correcting the whole, it's led to some pretty damaging outcomes. But on the flip side, it's also led to massive innovations. And I just returned from a conference in Chicago, and some of the breakthroughs in medicine right now have got me so excited. I can't even stop reading at night. I'm like, okay, I gotta put my book down and go to bed. But yeah, some of the breakthroughs are so exciting. And that's one of the reasons I've called my clinic East West, is because I love the ancient, the tradition. I love the soulful aspect of the medicine and the healing aspect that resides in some of the traditional practices, the things that worked 3,000 years ago that still work today. I love those, but I'm just as fascinated, and maybe sometimes I lean into the future even more than the past, and that's where I was studying. And so some of the things we're learning about, like organ transplants, pretty soon, in maybe 10, 20 years, you can take a stem cell from your liver, for example, and if you need a liver transplant, or if you're like, man, we just can't get this thing revitalized, well, you can grow a new liver, maybe a new heart, maybe a new brain. We're already seeing that there's an FDA approved process where we can take a sample, a biopsy, and there's an orthopedic surgeon in the group, very open-minded, but also very steeped into holistic medicine. Loved what I did, and he and I got along great. But he's been working with me, and we're going to get our pain interventionists trained on a procedure where we can take a biopsy of your cartilage, send that to a lab. It's called V-cell. This is different than like very small embryonic like stem cells, which a lot of people are using that therapy, which is another powerful one. But V-cell is just VCEL, and you can look that up online if you'd like. Shawnee, maybe you could put that in the notes for everybody. But V-cell is where we send that cartilage sample, we send a biopsy from the knee to the lab, and they regrow your cartilage. And then we can replace the cartilage that was damaged in your knee or the meniscus. And that's very exciting, because these meniscectomies are what leads to issues with osteoarthritis, and progressively lead to joint replacements. And so, man, if we can replace organs, replace joints, keep your skin, your hair, your eyes healthy with these amazing peptides, there's so much that can happen. But as we think about this longevity, is Dan Sullivan was talking about at this conference. He's all about the mindsets, and he's someone who's almost 78 years old. He calls it his halftime party, and he's got a goal to live to be 156. But if you don't have the right mindsets, none of the technology matters. And even the right mindsets for being open-minded to some of the things we'll be talking about today with peptides, and with some of this, how we're merging some of this ancient Chinese wisdom in with modern medicine. But without the mindsets of, hey, I want to have more greater relationships, I want to have an open, a level of openness and curiosity and imagination that's going to help me build a better future for myself. Those are going to be some critical things. Then looking at, the levels of purpose you've got, what drives you in life is a really critical thing. Looking at the quality of your relationships, and then also, thinking about your financial stability, your financial freedom. These are really important keys. And yes, just like Craig Venter, who was the first person to have his entire genome sequenced. I think he spent upwards of like almost $500 million to get it sequenced. I think he personally spent about $100 million on that. And but he got it done. And now if you fast forward 20 years later, we can get your entire genome sequenced for just a few $100s, which is phenomenal. And we're learning more and more about the genes, but what we now know is that there's this epigenetic factor. What resides above the genes are responsible for 80% of the outcome. So the genes are really important in your body, the DNA, what you inherited from your parents. But there's other things that are going to be more important. So as we start breaking down the genetics and the DNA, and as if you look at the DNA, everything has an expression. So the DNA is in your cells. And so if you look at your liver cells, these hepatocytes have a very specific function and a very specific expression. If you look at the DNA in your brain, those cells are programmed to have a very specific expression. You look at the DNA in your lungs, your liver, your kidneys, every system in your body has a genetic expression. And if you look at that from the lens of the observers 3,000 years ago, where they didn't have microscopes, and they're looking at the body from and they actually did experiments on where they would take prisoners and do open body dissections, and they would do some pretty ruthless experiments, but they're like, well, they're prisoners, so we can treat them how we want. Not super humane, but they did learn a lot of the physiology. So some people just think there's no foundation in reality with Chinese medicine, but there's an enormous foundation in reality, but it was based on their observation with different sets of tools. But what they realized is that every single one of these organs, they said there's an energetic component to these organs. And they noticed it if they'd eat animal organs, they notice a different energetic quality, different flavors, different tastes. Stimulate different organs, like bitter flavors. They go and they're an astringent for the heart, and they can help, really balance out the heart. Now we're learning like certain bitters. If you look at skullcap or scutellaria or gentiana or gardenia. Now, these are very bitter herbs in Chinese medicine, and that bitterness is like an astringent for the cardiovascular system. And so, but they also looked at the heart, and they said, well, there's a component to the heart that is an overarching, kind of source of joy and happiness for the body, and they called that the Shen. So in the Chinese medical philosophy, there's 5 parts to your spirit, but your big spirit's called the Shen. But inside of that big Shen, there's the little Shen, which resides over your heart. And the heart and the pericardium and the small intestine and triple burner or Sanjiao meridians, those all are direct energetic correlations to the Shen. And so the Shen in the traditional Chinese philosophy or Eastern medicine is that's the emperor or the empress. So pretty interesting, because when you have Shen disturbances, and I think we've all had this, you may have a red tip on your tongue. So stick out your tongue, and do you have a red tip? You may have a little bit of disturbance in the heart. The Shen are people who get easily anxious, and you just kind of feel not grounded. That's where you have the fire energy, which is the heart channel. But that fire energy can be very creative. You can be a person who's very expressive. The heart is about being on time, so it's about promptness and rhythm. And you'll notice that when people's hearts are aligned, and when there's really good heart coherence, you'll notice a heart rate variability. Like if you do heart math, you'll see your heart rate variability will be really pronounced. You'll have a great, a high level of heart rate variability is really healthy. You don't want a heart that's just beating all the time. You want a heart that contracts and relaxes, and that's part of the Shen. And so the Shen, and the biggest thing that's necessary from an Eastern philosophy is is making sure that the heart is connected to the heavens or to a higher power. And so it's really important that you keep your heart clear. And as we're learning more and more about Alzheimer's, some of the biggest predictors for Alzheimer's is if you have that heart attack in your 50s, 60s, 70s, then your rate of dementia is going to accelerate. And so one of the things I'm communicating all the time to the men I work with, and especially the ambitious ones who are they're professionals, they're CEOs, they're entrepreneurs, they're out there slugging it away, is that is going to limit your lifespan and your health span, because the more you start pushing your heart, your timeliness and that beating rhythm gets blocked. And so the Shen is one of the most critical aspects of this, because the Shen at night when we go to sleep, it's that part of our soul that goes back to heaven and gets nourished. And so we look at that as the subconscious mind really can get some influence and have some context around reality, because our brains are just predictive machines. We're looking for predictions and patterns and logic and everything in life, but so much of life doesn't always make sense. And so if you have a healthy Shen, you can create a nice abundant reality for yourself, but you really need some good sleep to do that. And I think if you don't believe me, try going without sleep for a few nights and then let me know how your creative juices are flowing. And so staying grounded in reality but also nurturing that subconscious mind is a really critical part of the Shen. And some of the herbs that we use to nourish the Shen would be like Schisandra. Schisandra has been shown to be very impactful, very, very powerful for this. Hawthorn berry is another one to really calm the Shen. And then as you look at it from a peptide perspective, this is where Epitalon is one of the most powerful peptides to just nourish the Shen and stabilizing that HPA axis. The second part, so Shen, there's no order, but if we talk about the Hoon, since we're on the sleep thread, Hoon is the part of the soul that relates to your liver and your gallbladder, or your wood energy in the body. And so remember, Chinese medicine, they think they look at the body as being the microcosm of the macrocosm. And so they look at nature and they say, well, how can we best flow with nature? And the Hoon is the best way of looking at this. And the Hoon is what protects your body as you sleep. The Hoon is like the general in the army. So when the heart or the Shen says, hey, this is the plan, I've got the connection, I know what our purpose is, it's your liver that actually fulfills that purpose. It helps you keep goals. It helps you stay focused on the bigger picture. But it also helps you generate this sense of rightness, or and some people can go over the top in that, or some people don't have any core values at all. And they're, so the expression of the Hoon is like a green bamboo, where it's flexible, but it's got an upright growth trajectory to heaven. So if you have a really healthy expression in your liver, you're going to notice that you have better skin, better detoxification, bowel movements. You're going to have flexibility and pliability in your muscles. You'll notice that you recover well. You have great hormonal function. All of these things are necessary, but from more of an esoteric perspective, you're going to have a deep sense of purpose, that you know exactly what your course is. It's the Shen that feeds the purpose, but it's the Hoon that helps you execute on it. So that deep sense of purpose comes with a strategy and tactics and a mission in order for you to accomplish what you're setting out to accomplish. Some of the best peptides for the Hoon are like the Semeglutide, which will be, I'm going to be sharing that in just a minute here, and we'll bring it all together because it's a GLP agonist, which means that it's going to work with the Hoon, the Zhi, which relates more to your kidneys, and then the Yi, which relates more to your pancreas and spleen. And then even the shin, which helps cardiovascular function. So semaglutide is a great one when you think liver, because it's a blood sugar balancer. It also helps with obesity. Clinical trials are showing phenomenal outcomes for patients who not only have cardiovascular disease. It helps minimize blood pressure, lowers cholesterol, triglycerides. But some of the other peptides that are phenomenal for the Hoon and for your liver are Tesamorelin, Ipamorelin, CJC1295. All of these are phenomenal because they help regenerate the liver. Anytime you stimulate growth hormone, your liver just loves that, because it's the fastest regenerating organ in the body. And so if you think about when your kidneys aren't working well, your liver gets backed up too, because your liver has to, if you get dehydrated, for example, now your liver is trying to keep the body hydrated. Or if you have backup in the gut, now your liver's got to work more on the detoxification, because you're not breaking things down. If you don't have the right small intestine secretions, now your liver is working double time to produce more bile. And even for blood sugar regulation, when you have high levels of stress, your body releases cortisol in response to that stress. And then right behind cortisol is the liver goes into this process called gluconeogenesis. And so it will pull from proteins out of the muscles in your butt, your legs, and it will break them down into sugar just so cortisol has the energy it needs. I mean, that's where you think of the liver in your body, and it's just so adaptable and such an exciting organ, but it's also one that gets pretty beat up. Tesamorelin is a really key component for recharging the DNA in your liver, and by getting rid of any fibrosis. And that's where some of these cell core binders are excellent for keeping your liver healthy. The next one we'll talk about is your jur. Now, this is interesting. We talked about this last night in perspective of the Jing, because Jing and Qi and Shen are like that's the three treasures, and it relates to in the herbal world, we relate it to astragalus, ginseng, and cordyceps. But your jur is that's that sense of destiny, but it's also your wisdom. So when you make decisions, and you have a healthy jur, then you're going to be able to know exactly what to do when. And so you'll have this residual of wisdom that helps you make the one decision that gets rid of 1,000. And I think the book Essentialism that we have all of our members reading right now by Greg McKeown, Essentialism kind of summarizes jur very well from a philosophical area, where it's not let's not put more things on you and create more activities and more obligations and more commitments. Let's actually do less so that we can streamline and prioritize. And that's where jur comes in. If this is out of balance, you'll notice that people are very fearful. They don't have confidence in themselves when they make a decision, or they make a decision and then they're trying to back out of it as quickly as possible, because they don't have confidence in themselves. But I think we've all seen this, and maybe you guys know of somebody. How many of you have seen a person who's just very decisive, and they know how to say no? They say no to the right things. They say yes to the right things, but they don't need a lot of deliberation around a decision, because they know, yes, this fits my overall purpose and my overall mission. But it's interesting in the Eastern philosophy is the Big Dipper is what houses your Jing and dumps it into your kidneys. And then your kidneys have this energy system called the Mingmen fire. And that's what fuels the overall destiny. So there's a blueprint that gets put in your DNA where you are here on earth to accomplish something incredible and to transform your life and the lives of others. And so you've got this kind of hard wiring happening in your body. And so the kidneys, it's that fear. But the other side of that is the wisdom is what your jur is. So kind of interesting there. If you look at the Poe, so I named my cat Poe, and Poe was a 21-year-old cat when he finally passed, and that was last summer. And we buried him out off the Great Salt Lake, one of my favorite places on the planet. So I knew if I look out at the Great Salt Lake, I could remember my favorite cat, Poe. I actually adopted him. We found him on the side of the road. He was taken to the Humane Society in Hawaii, and they were going to euthanize these 3 kittens. And so I said, no, we can't let them get euthanized. And so we took them home and just started nurturing these kittens until they're big enough to have these kittens as part of our family. And sure enough, they grew up, and then we brought them back to Utah when I set up my practice here in 2004. Poe was the longest living cat. I think one of them got taken out by a mountain lion soon after we moved to Park City. Unfortunately, the other 2 lived quite a while, but Poe is that part. The reason why I named him Poe, because he was my favorite of the 3 cats, but it's the animal spirit that we're all connected to. And I think if you read any of the studies on happiness, behavioral health, you'll see that there's this beautiful thing that happens when we take care of a pet, or when people have dogs or cats, they tend to be a little bit happier. And so it's a really nice thing. And so your Poe is that connection to the animal kingdom, but it relates to your bones. And so it relates to the metal element, the lungs and large intestine. And the Poe is really important for you to know what to hang on to and what to let go of in life. And it helps you know what things are valuable to you. So that's one of the things. If you think about the minerals we pull out of the earth, that's where we get gold, we get cadmium now for batteries, and lithium, which is a prized mineral. We get silver, we get aluminum. All these things are part of that mineral family. Not to mention magnesium, manganese, all your trace minerals that really help. That's our spark in our body. But then the Poe, from a more of a spiritual side, it helps you connect to a higher power. So it's your connection to a masculine deity. So in Western culture, we'd call that God, Jesus. In more of an Eastern culture, it would just be like it's more of the connection to your being true to the patriarchal system in your family. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And you'll see when there's a disconnect from the fathers, you'll see that people can tend to be more depressed. And if there's not loyalty to the family, you'll see that the posture changes in a person. They don't breathe as well. They're not as inspired. And I think that's one of the best gifts that my dad's given to me, and my grandfather's on both sides, is this sense of belonging, but this sense of self-assurance. And so when I took the Clifton Strengths Finder, my number 1 strength is self-assurance. My number 2 is futuristic. Number 3 is strategic, and there's a couple others in there. But I look at that and I said, I think that's because I have such a powerful connection with the males in my family, and the females. Don't get me wrong, but from a kind of an Eastern philosophy context, the Poe, once you strengthen that Poe, you'll have healthy lungs, you won't have asthma, you'll have healthy guts, you'll have good microbiome. So pretty interesting. If you look at the best peptides to support, the Jur, the Poe. The Jur would be, once again, more of that Epitalon, because it connects the kidneys with the heart, with the brain, and the adrenals. But the other thing that helps stabilize the Jur is Selenk, because it's a GABAergic. So it also helps take some burden off the kidneys. And then ARA 290. From a Poe perspective, the lungs and the large intestine, this is where LL37 is really critical, because it can go in there, and LL37 is a cathelicidin that can eradicate those biofilms and break down any infections. But it's also regenerative by nature. So it's kind of like, the masculine side, and every man and woman has it, but that masculine side confronts things that needs to be confronted, and makes corrections, and then builds those things back up and nurtures them. And that's the yin side, or the feminine side. LL37 has both of those properties. And then BPC 157 is another very powerful peptide because it helps correct leaky guts. And if you have leaky gut, you're going to have leaky lungs and leaky brain. And then the fifth part of this overall kind of 5 element and the spiritual side of this is your yi. And yi is, and I mentioned this last night in the hack that on the back of my pants, I have this saying on my Roan pants. It says, "Thoughts are ideas in motion." And so or in transit. And so it's like an idea is when you start putting thoughts together. And then intelligence is when you can actually do something with that idea that's meaningful and useful. And so the yi is what allows you to take in information. And if you have the brightness of the yi and the color is yellow and it relates to your spleen, pancreas, and stomach, but this is where you can generate energy from. But if you can take in for example, the conversation that you have, maybe with your spouse today or with a coworker or one of your clients, as you take in that information and you can assimilate it and you can understand and interpret what somebody is communicating to you, then you can put it into something that's meaningful and workable and that makes sense and creates intelligence. And what's interesting is if you look at the intelligence of humans, 100 years ago, we raised the IQ by about 5 points every year. And so what was considered a high IQ 100 years ago would be considered a low IQ today, which is pretty interesting. But that's because of this yi, this energy that we've gotten. And now humans are living longer. We have more access to nutrients. And so it's that nutritional energy that becomes this vitality in our brain. And so that's the yi. And some of the best peptides for this, once again, Semiglutide, which we'll talk about today, or Semaglutide, however you want to pronounce it, is fine with me. This is where you want to look at thymosin beta 4. It's a regenerative peptide. It does have some blood sugar stability to it. You can also look at some of the other, even IGF-1 is a great stabilizer, MOD-SC and 5-amino-1-MQ. Those are some of the core peptides for these overall parts of the aspects of the soul in Chinese medicine. So hopefully that gives you a cool picture of what's possible out there. And some of the amazing things that are going on from if we just take a step back and we say, well, man, maybe there is some wisdom that we can bring into this new modern medicine. I think that's where I get super excited, as you guys probably know. And so I'll share with you guys just a little bit of peptides just as we finish up, because I've had a lot of people. I mean, I can't keep up with all the emails. So if you've sent me one, then I apologize that I've not been able to keep up, but I promised many of you today I'll talk about Semiglutide, because it is, it was made it through the FDA trials just a few months ago as a treatment for obesity, and actually an effective one. And it's one of these drugs. It's the first medication that I've seen that they sequenced it the right way and they're using it in the right way, that it actually outperforms or performs at the same level of bariatric surgery. And so if you think about the power of this, we can literally transform people's lives and health. But when you couple this with some of the other peptide stacks, with CellCore, you're going to see some amazing breakthroughs, and we're already seeing this in our patients. So let's, just first of all, if you look at peptides, once again, peptides are an expression from your DNA, an expression from the cells, and peptides bind directly on the surface side of the cell. And let me check. It looks like there's some comments coming in. I appreciate that, Judy. So thanks for I'm glad you enjoyed the conversation. It was a little esoteric. And thank you, Diane. Great information today. Thank you. Did you say a few weeks ago people are coming into the clinic who were diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but they had something else instead? And sometimes with Alzheimer's, we see it as type 3 diabetes. And so semaglutide is one of those peptides that researchers are looking at it as being something super powerful for preventing Alzheimer's. So I think that might have been what I said. And then we also see that heavy metals are a contributing factor in about 80% of those, where there's an overabundance of lead and mercury that can really start to downregulate the brain. But we also see there's infections. So with Alzheimer's, it's an energy crisis because the insulin's not in the brain to get to pull the nutrients into the neurons. You've also got chronic inflammation because of that, and then you have these glial cells, these microglia that don't protect the neurons. And a lot of that interference comes from the heavy metals that get stored in our fatty tissue. And then you'll also see that there's an abundance of infections that go on. Usually it's the mold toxicity, mold infections. So yeah, so hopefully that answered your question, Diane. Okay, so peptides, they're pleiotropic. They don't set off an immune alarm or histamine response. Researchers, we've been looking at these. Most of them were formulated in Russia. That's kind of their origins. And they were used initially with some of the Russian sailors who were working on some of the nuclear projects, and the nuclear reactors were leaking. And then these soldiers got cancer and they were just dying. They're dropping like flies. And so the generals in the Russian military said, we've got to protect our sailors because we can't lose anymore. So it took them almost 8 years before they brought in some doctors. And Dr. Kavasin is he's the maker of Epitalon and several other formulations, but he's most famously known for Epitalon, but also for the work he did with these sailors. He started giving them peptide injections, and the sailors that had the injections stopped having cancer versus the ones who did. And he completely changed the health of these sailors. And then he started using this in his clinic around the towns in Poland, Yugoslavia, Romania. He started to see that even when Chernobyl happened, the people in the surrounding village who had peptide injections, the surrounding town, they actually didn't have cancer like everybody else got. So we look at peptides, and they have a very powerful ability to cause healthy DNA expression. So, and they don't have the toxic accumulation like even natural supplements can, or herbs. Most of these are injections, so they're very active once they get into the body, and I think many of you have experienced them. So one of these peptides is known as Semiglutide. It's a glucagon-like peptide, or a GLP-1, and a lot of the exciting studies are coming out that are showing it to be very powerful in reducing weight, which is kind of a big one. They found that this GLP-1 is widely distributed on pancreatic and other tissues. It has multiple biological effects, such as reducing neural inflammation, promoting nerve growth, improving heart function, suppressing appetite, delaying gastric emptying, regulating blood lipid metabolism, and reducing fat deposition. It has neuroprotective, so it can help the brain, anti-infectious, cardiovascular protective, and metabolic regulatory effects. And so overall, they're saying this to be very exciting. And I mentioned in this study of 2,000 participants, and this study was unique because it wasn't participants who had type 2 diabetes, because all the other studies they've looked at is they're watching hemoglobin A1C, and they're watching insulin, fasting insulin, C-reactive protein, fasting glucose for type 2 diabetes. But actually in the non-type 2 diabetes, what they found is that the participants who use this this treatment versus placebo, over the course of treatment, they lost 15% of their overall body weight, and that equates to about 30 pounds. And so that was a pretty exciting outcome. And they found that the hemoglobin A1C markers drop on average of 2 points. So once again, another really exciting breakthrough there. They found that semaglutide actually helps with pain. There's another piece of the research. They found it to be have cardiovascular safety and benefits with patients who have type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular issues. So many exciting things. And then, if you look at what it does in the brain, it helps increase synaptic transmission. So the synapses are where you have dopamine and serotonin and all of those cool messengers that get relayed more. It has nerve protection. It decreases learning defects. It increases memory. It helps with the proliferation of neural stem cells. It helps with memory impairment. It helps with neural inflammation. It increases motor function, and it increases the signal of satiety. So if you don't feel satisfied with meals, this is a very powerful peptide. The other thing it does in the liver is it helps with glucose production. So it lowers it. So your liver is not constantly going into that gluconeogenesis. It decreases liver fat content for fatty liver disease. It lowers the liver enzyme levels in blood plasma. And it also helps with hepatic steatosis. So if you have blockages in the ducts, it helps with that. Some of the side effects I should note is in the studies, the first few times you take it, you may get some nausea, but that happens in about 5 to 10% of the subjects, but that usually that goes away. And this is where we would never just use this alone, and we want to have lifestyle. You want to have cell core, so you're going to want to be using some biotoxin binders. There's different Chinese herbal formulas that you'd use to maximize this, but just be aware of that may happen. In the pancreas, the GLP-1s, they increase insulin synthesis. It helps with insulin secretion. It lowers blood glucose. It helps with the islet B cell protection and proliferation. In your digestive tract, it decreases gastric emptying. So that's really important. And then it decreases the gastrointestinal peristalsis. So a lot of our patients who have issues with blood sugar regulation or weight gain, they have difficulties with digestive systems and don't always have the best stools. So this helps with that. And then finally, in the heart, cardiovascular protection. It improves heart rate. It's got anti-inflammatory actions. It helps with myocardial ischemia injury. So people have had cardiovascular events, heart disease. It decreases endothelial dysfunction, which is really important, especially with COVID and long haul or post-vaccine injuries. And then it's also has atrial natriuretic peptide secretion. So it helps stabilize the heart rhythm. So some fun things, just as you look at that and we say, wow, well, this one peptide, it almost fits all 5 elements in Chinese medicine. So kind of an exciting breakthrough I wanted to share with you guys, but what are your thoughts on that today? Anyone have any questions or insights that you've got? Awesome. Well, yes. And just some of the things to be aware of is there's 2 different studies. One, they showed a study of using the lower, the 1 mg versus the 2.4 mg. They found that weekly injections are typically the best for this. There is an oral version as well. Oral has to be taken every day. Seems to be that they have very similar outcomes. The injections tend to be a little more affordable overall. So hopefully that helps. But All right, you guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this today. Thanks so much for being part of our community. We've just had so many exciting things going on around here. And holy smokes, the future is coming faster than you think, to borrow Peter Diamandis' phrase, or maybe that's someone else's. But I am super excited about it. Really grateful for you guys. And I will see you next week. Enjoy your day.